Hello, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar. And the topic is a little bit outside of Donman than what we'd normally do, because it's really just saying that for most purposes, Donman creates the data that we can then use in different ways for emailing. The only real email that you can do from Donman itself nowadays is the email button on the actual donor screen. But that's not the content of the email or anything, but it will allow you to at least create a contact record to say that we had sent the person an email today and whatever the subject might be. Okay. So what we'll do is we'll get started. So if we're going to email, normally what we would do is still go through the process that we would do for a postal mailing or anything like that, is to go through the donor appeals and create a selection of people that we can use. One of the options that I'll just touch on quickly is when we do the selection file, and we call it whatever we want to call it, as we go through and you'll see the second last question on the screen has email address, and if we put an M there, means that we'll only pick up people that have got an email address as well as the other criteria that we may have created. So we may be a mail list or a mail code or codes or money or any other things that we'd normally do to segment our data. But in this case, adding this parameter means that I can then use this whole list, because everyone in the list should have an actual email address. Whether the email address itself is still valid or you're going to get a bounce back or whatever, you can't tell at this time, but that is the way to sort of narrow down the actual list of people, so that you're not getting half the records in there that have got an email address and the other half that haven't. Once we've done that, it's pretty much the same as creating our mail merge data file as we would do normally from our selection of people, and making sure that the actual email field is included in the data, because by default it's not one of the standard fields. If perchance you haven't done that before, we'll quickly go through. So what I could do is choose my selection file, go through, whether I'm doing separate fields normally for emails, because you want to have something that is to your first name, etc. So as we go through, I'll leave the name as the default. On this second screen here where the fields come out, everything above this dotted line will come out no matter what, so they are the core fields, and you can see under there email has been added. If email wasn't showing there and we wanted to use it, down the bottom of the screen we can click on File, choose Donors, and then across from there click in Field, and that will show us every field as part of the donor record. If we're there and just type an E, that will take us to email. We can click there and OK, and that will add it to the list like you see here. So that will always now be part of my export until I manually go through and highlight that field and click on the Delete Selected. So for most of these things you will do, it doesn't really matter if you've got extra fields that you're not going to use for this particular mailing, but have as many as you need, because it's easy to ignore fields or just not utilize them than it is to have to come back, create the data, and do the whole thing from scratch. So once we've done that, go through, that will create our mail merge file, and from there it's pretty much saying what do we then want to do with that text file. So up to this point, if I said, look, the only email I can do, as I said earlier, from Donman is looking at a donor's record and clicking on the actual email button down the bottom of the screen. Okay. It'll say enter a topic for your email or your letter here. Okay. And then I have the option to add it to the person's contact records. So all that will do is bring up the new email box with your address on there ready to go, the address of the person and the subject, and from there put in the content of your email. So that's all right for a one-off, because unfortunately as time has sort of gone through, we have found that as spammers sort of use email to sort of send unsolicited mails and things like that, that the program that we did have originally, and people who've used Donman for quite a while will know that there was at that time a program I could use from a selection file to do bulk emails, but it was very hard to keep up with, the changes and all the things that Microsoft were patching in order to stop spammers, also stop the whole lot of other things. So fortunately, as Microsoft Office has progressed, emailing has been built into Office or into Word, but only to a particular level. So what we'll do first is we'll minimize Donman. If we go into Word, and I'll just open the document that I was playing with earlier. Okay. In theory. Okay. So if I'm going to do a letter merge, of course, I'd go through you and I'd have my letter, so I'd have my letterhead at the top, I'd have my document, my text, my fields, etc., the same as I would do for any normal document that I was going to merge to print. So that works all right if I'm going to go through, choose mailings, finish and merge, and edit individual documents. Yeah. So if I said, well, that's okay for people that I need to actually do a mailing, like postal mailing for and print out and put them in envelopes, etc., but the next sort of evolution of that is to say, well, what if I want to email people from here? So utilizing the same document, I will lose the header because it sort of disappears in the process. But on your mailings toolbar, if you go across to Start Mail Merge, you'll see one of the options here is email messages. If I choose that, you can see the format of the page has now changed where it's no longer a printed page, but it is a HTML document. So as I was saying, I've now lost the header, and if I wanted to have that, I could paste that back in as the body of the email. But from there I can delete that, and you can see the same as I would do for a normal merging document. I've got hi or the salutation and the first name field. The text that I want to send, I can have links. Anything else I can, because I'm doing it and it will simulate an individual email, you still have your signature and everything and paste that in. So the difference being that from there, if we go across to finish and merge, I then have an option that says send email messages. So instead of doing the one we'd normally do, I can do that. So what this will allow us to do is whatever we see on the screen, whether you have graphics, links, whatever text you have, that will be the email. That'll be the whole body of the email of whatever's on this page. So if we go to send email messages, okay, the Word has then picked up that we have got an email field, so it's saying, email to. We can then put in the subject line that we want to have. Okay. The mail format, normally HTML, which allows you to then have the graphics and things like that. You could do plain text, but you'll lose links and you'll lose fonts and things like that you might want to keep. From there, as you would do with a normal merge, you'd go through and say all records, or in this case I can say just from, or just do the current record. So that will only do the first record in my system. So when you do that, just OK. As soon as you click on the OK button, this will start sending the emails through your Outlook mechanism. Okay, so you'll see them in your outbox, and later on you'll see them all in your sent folder. If you're doing this, it's probably a good idea to have a more generic email address rather than your own work email address. So you might have fundraising at organization name or something like that, so that the replies would also come back to that email address. So if someone wanted to write to you, and that may be a mailbox that's picked up by a couple of people as you go through. So if we click on OK, doesn't look like much has happened at that point. But if I were to go into, if I can get things to organize and, okay, so the email, as you can see, has now come across. It's got the subject that I put in, and exactly what we saw on the page is what I'm getting from there. And you go, well, that works good for, probably low volume emails that we want to send to a small number of people where it's not that complex. We don't want to do that. That, of course, is no good for emailing receipts because everyone's going to have individual receipts, etc. And normally we don't want people to have the option to be able to just pick this up and start editing the text in there. because that's very easy to do. So to get around that sort of problem and say, okay, look, I'm past that first stage of just doing, the low volume email, and whatever I see on the screen is what people are going to get, and you go, well, that works fine. There are a couple of add-on tools that you can get for Word that will link in and will allow you to send individual PDF documents as attachments when you're doing the actual merging. Okay. One of them is called PDF Machine, and the other one is from an organization called Mappy Labs called Mail Merge Toolkit. Other people have told me that they also use the full version of Acrobat Document, like Acrobat to do PDFs, where you can actually create the PDFs, set them up as a merge, and you can also merge those through. After that sort of evolution is where you start doing things like online with Mailchimp or programs like that, where again all we're doing from Donman is creating the data, exporting it, and we're then uploading it to the online mechanism. A lot of the things for PDFing is good for receiving, again, where there's fairly low volume. Email can be very pedantic as far as sending it through, where if we start sending thousands of emails, or if we had that many receipts, that'd be lovely. Just the volume of email that we send from a particular email address can get you identified as a potential spammer just based on the volume of email that you've sent in the time frame. So that's something also that's sort of come to play, in the last 5 years or 10 years, where email is becoming more prevalent as a way to contact people, and we just need to be careful or cautious on, how we actually send if we're doing bigger volumes. So for low volumes, as I said, we could do and say, okay, look, if this was per chance my receipt document, so I'd have that all set up ready to merge. And over on the right-hand side here, where normally my toolbar would finish with finish and merge, I've now got these extra two options here. And that's because I've installed the add-on program from Mappy Labs, which will allow me to do that sort of merge to PDF. So what the person will get in their PDF is this text here. So it will come across with dear first name, so that'll merge just like normal. You can have the links, etc., except they won't work very well in a PDF, but you can have those. So if I go across to merge and send, it pops up a different screen where you can see at the top now it's saying Mail Merge Toolkit, merge to email. So again, it's got the two, and it'll have email as the field. If perchance your field was called something different and it doesn't get picked up automatically, you can go through, just click on the drop-down and choose the field that contains the email addresses from your data file. The advantage of either of these two sort of mechanisms is that you don't have to worry about maintaining a BCC list or a distribution list or any of those sort of things, because everyone will get an individual email, and there will be no other email addresses visible on so it's not like you get an email that's got hundreds of other people's email addresses on that really you don't want to have on there. From there, I can then have the subject line. So in this case, I've just got webinar test, and the format that it's going to create is a PDF attachment. And the options under here, you can do it as a different RTF attachment, a plain text attachment, a PDF attachment optimized for printing. So depending on what you're sending the person, so it might be printing if you're doing receipts, etc. Or if it's something that they're just going to read on the screen, you can do it optimized for viewing. Okay. So from there, the attachment name will come up automatic, and it says use document name as the attachment name. So whatever my document is called, in this case, email webinar doc, will be the name of the attachment. The same mechanism exists as in the normal merging, where you've got send, and you can do all records, current record, or you can choose a particular record. Okay. So here it's got an option that says use default account for sending messages. So in this case, it will send straight from my account, whereas again, if we had the option to say, no, I've got a more general account, then I wouldn't use that and I'd choose the account. The program itself, I think it's around $24 or something like that. You can sort of get all the details online to buy a license for it, and it will then allow you to have unrestricted use for that. I don't think there's too many restrictions in the trial version, and it's good for 30 days. So if it's something you wanted to try, certainly try it, and it's a very economical option. This, of course, is now getting way outside of what Donman does, but it's more just to highlight to people that, here's options that are available, because, sending receipts and things by email or other correspondence by email is a cost-saving measure, and lots of people are obviously looking at, what mechanisms can we use. So in this case, I'll leave the options as I've got them here. So it's going to be a PDF attachment. It goes through, and if I click on OK, it then brings up a screen here where I can put in, again, I can put in fields. So if I said, whatever text I want to have, so I might create the actual text that I want to send to the people as the body of the email. I can create that and then just paste it into here. The same sort of way as in the merge document master back here, I can also choose the merge fields. So in this case, if I've got the first name, so I can put that in. Down the bottom here, I've got a reference number and I've got the donor number. So if you wanted to, in the subject line back, so that's just going to send it now. On the subject line, you can put, the receipt number and something, as well. So you can put fields into the actual subject line as well as in the actual thing that we're sending. Okay, so in this case, because I said just the one document, it's saying yes, out of the 39 records, it's sent to one, which is, in this case, I don't want to send everyone an email that they're going to get, what's this? Okay, so if I close that, and again, go back to my emails, so you can see where this one's a little bit different. It hasn't quite done what probably because I didn't do it properly there, but you can see it's got webinar test, so it's got the subject that I put in, but because I didn't actually mean to click that, it hasn't put in all the body of the text that I had on the screen, whereas that would normally come in, and the text that was on the original screen is now in the actual PDF document. So this is basically going back to how we lay out a normal printed document, and that will become the actual body of the PDF. So you can see that would also work well for a receipt, because you'd have all the details there, you'd have the receipt layout down the bottom of the screen, but it would arrive to the person as a PDF. There's only so much we can do, of course, as far as maintaining, what people can edit. Unfortunately now, or fortunately, depending on what we're doing, but nowadays it is very easy to, go online and Google and say, okay, I'm looking for something to edit a PDF, or I'm looking for something to turn a PDF back to a Word document, things like that. There is only so many steps we can do. But with the actual merge of PDFs, the PDF machine software, which works very similar to the Mailchimp one I just showed you, does have options built into it as well that would allow you to say, people print this, they can save it, but they can't, edit it. You can have a password protect it. You can do different levels with that, and I believe you can also do that with Acrobat. So, if you're full version of Acrobat and you'd set up your document like this, but I'd be doing it in Acrobat, and I could attach my data, put in my fields, and then again merge. Okay. So again, the PDF merge, good for receipts in the low volume sort of stuff, things like that. Higher volume, you probably wouldn't want to do that way, purely again because you may be hit as a spammer or something like that. So that's just a way that from the basic version of Word where we're saying, look, I'm just doing either a letter or I'm doing the straight merge to email, or we just want to do something a little bit different for documents that we want to have as attachments, where the attachment itself will be individualized for the person. So it sort of goes at a different level than just having one PDF. If it was something along the lines of a newsletter or something, you could do the same sort of thing, but normally it'd be easier and volume-wise, as far as network traffic goes and email traffic, would be to send the body of the email, but in here you would have a link like here where it's got a link to recorded webinars. You'd have a link to say, click here to read our newsletter or something like that, and the newsletter itself would be on your web page. So that cuts down a whole lot of traffic because you're not sending, graphics and a whole lot of text through there. It's really just to let people know that, yes, the newsletter is available. Click here, you can read it. So if they've got email, they're going to have internet, so very easy to click on that link and sort of go through. Once you get to higher volume of email and saying, okay, well now I've extracted quite a few records out of Donman, and I want to do something with that. That's where you would move from doing it in Word or something more local to using an online tool. There are quite a number of online tools available. One that I know from talking to different organizations and people, the people are utilizing is one called Mailchimp, and it's a fairly easy mechanism where you can send emails, and when you send them through there, so you can set up your newsletters, you can attach your data, you can do your lists, you can do things like that. You can do everything else. And when you send them, the advantage of the online systems is that they sort of stagger the emails, so they're not sort of sending out 5,000 emails in one hit. It'll sort of flow out, in the next 4 hours or something like that, just so that everything gets out there, but you're not potentially, going to get sort of whacked as a spam email sender, etc. So for that sort of stuff, if we were using something like the Mailchimp, it means that if I've created the data out of Donman, you'd sign up, you can get the Mailchimp up to a certain level is free. So, you can sort of go through and do this and utilize it for your newsletter mailings and things like that. From there, one of the options is I've captured the screens here in this document that says, where do you want to import the subscribers from? Okay, so you can use settings from last import. So if you're creating a file that's always the same name, you can sort of do that. Because ways you can create the data, if you're doing specifically for a mailing list and it was fairly restricted in the people and the fields that you actually needed, you can set up a report in the Visual Reporter that basically just pulls out the fields you need. So you don't need addresses and all of those other things. You really just need first name, surname, maybe position, company, email address, and the donor number. So for that, you'd say, look, that's fairly consistent with what I want to extract every single time I want to do this. And from there, I can then have a file that's always called the same name. So I could then use this first setting here. In this case here, I said, no, I've got a CSV or a tab delimited file. So as you go through the screens, the next one will say, okay, now upload the file. So you can then browse to your computer or your network drive, wherever it might be, and go through and see. You can see just under here where you selected the file, there's a option on the screen that says, I understand my billing plan will be automatically upgraded, if you go over the threshold of what they call their forever free plan. Okay, so depending on the volume that you're sending, and sorry I don't have the exact number or the details of that, but all of this is available online. You can just Google Mailchimp and get all the information from their website. We'll do that. So it means that when you sign up, you can do that, and it will automatically then upgrade you to a plan that you pay for. Okay. So when you upload this, the advantage, of course, is that even if you've uploaded the same list, duplicate email addresses, will be disregarded, so you don't, end up sending people the same email 3 or 4 times or more as they go through. The thing that could come back and be a bit of a pain is where we have multiple people maybe in the same household using the one email address. That just means only one of them will get the email address unless we sort of dictate it and use the alternate fields from the donor record where we might say, dear John and family or something like that. So as we go through, we then select our file. So in this case, I had my email address export. It's basically a tab delimited text file. I've clicked the disclaimer thing here to say, yes, my plan will be upgraded as I go through. And as you get to the next screen here, you can basically match the fields or import the fields and identify what the fields are. So you can then use those in your actual newsletters and things that you're going to set up, whether it be a nice pamphlet you want to set up or it's actually a newsletter or whatever it is. Again, you can have fields in there. So in this case, donor number is just basically a text field. If you had more fields in your merge file that you've created, so yes, you can just say skip that field. That'll just ignore it. Other than that, I've got column name, first name. It's matching and it's giving me a example of the data under there. The same for surname. In this case, I haven't matched that at this point, but I go through, and then on my drop-down list of fields, I can say, yes, match this, and make that a field that I'm always going to use. Okay, and then again for the email address. So you can go through and you can match the fields to suit what data it is that you're uploading. For things that will happen as far as the emailing go is like you'll get bounce backs, or you get people who want to unsubscribe from your list, etc. like that. Mailchimp will then do all of that for you, basically. So when you look at your list later, you'll have a list or a tab on the screen that says, here's the people that have unsubscribed, or here's the bounce back emails and things like that. And that's where it becomes important for us to make sure that in the data we upload, we've got the donor number, because that's the only way we can do something in bulk with the donor records as we go backwards. So if I then said, look, okay, we've just sent out a newsletter, we've checked this a week later, 2 weeks later, whatever it is, let's look at, how many bounce backs we've had from that, or, how many unsubscribes, and then we need to do something with those donor records in bulk. Because if we've got bounce backs, it means the email address is just no good anymore, and there's not a lot we can do with that bar, remove it from donors' records. So there is a program in Donman that will allow you to have a selection file of people and clear out the email field. Okay, so if we get a whole lot of that, we can do that fairly easily. There's also other tools in Donman to do that, as long as we've got the selection file that we create from the donor numbers. So one of the webinars we did earlier was, how to create a selection file from an Excel file. And I think in just about everyone's manual folder under the special purpose PDF, those instructions will also be there. So it's basically saying all we really need to do is get the donor numbers for a selection file. We don't need addresses or names or email or anything like that. All we need is the number in order to do something with those records in bulk. Okay? So once you sort of create your list and go through, that will then become available, and you can create different lists for different mailing purposes and things like that, and you can maintain all of those things online. So this, as you can see, is going way beyond, again, like the Mail Merge Toolkit, going beyond what Donman is doing, but it's more to highlight that there are options available, and they're not always very expensive. So we don't have to spend a whole lot of money in order to get these things done as we go through. So if perchance I was using one of the online services like Mailchimp, or there are quite a number of those services through there, and I wanted to create a data file but not do it the normal way I extracted it out of Donman, instead of going through donor appeals and doing all of the things through there, what we could do is go into the report writer, and we can create a report in here. Open report for a minute. Okay, so in this case I've got one already called email address export. So depending on my criteria as I go through, it may be based on a particular mail list that I'm trying to do, or a code on the donor record, or a anything like that. But part of my criteria in this case is always email. The donor's email has to be greater than nothing, which means they have to have an email address in order to utilize this. If I was doing it for a list that's to do with the mailing list codes, not the mail code itself on the donor's record, then I can't do that from the donors. I would have to do that from the actual code pool records, which is where the mail lists are stored, but still fairly simple to do. So if we just start a new report, and I'll give you an idea how that's done. So if I choose code pool, so I just want to sort by donor number, it's not really that relevant to what I want to do. But then in my criteria, I can say code 1 equals, and I can see all the different things. So you can see in here some of these mixed up things, because code pools used for other things. But if I was, say, doing like my spring or my newsletter, then I can select that particular code, and that will always be true, because what we're saving here is the format or the criteria for the report, not the actual data. So if I said, okay, I want everyone on my newsletter list, and again, I still need to add the criteria from the donor file to say that the email greater than nothing. Okay, so that way I can do that, and down the bottom of the screen, I can really say what I'm looking for isn't so much in code for, because that's just what I'm using for the criteria. I can go back to the donor record and say, well, yes, again, what I need is the donor number, first name, surname, as we go through, and the email field. So any fields at all. But then when I do this later, I could say, let's save this to, say, report format. And this becomes my so if I save that, so next time I want to run that, especially if I'm doing this, say, on a monthly basis, I'm sending out newsletters, etc., I don't necessarily need to come in and, open the report, run it, and do what I need to. But if I'm also updating mail history, I can, because I can click on File, Save Report Data, as text, which is what I'd be using to upload, but I can also save it as a selection file, which I can then use to update the people's contact record to say that, we've sent them the email or we've sent them the appeal, etc. So we're starting to sort of keep all of that in play. Now that I've created the report, and I said I want to make that easier for myself to actually utilize, up the top of the screen under Options on your menu, so if we go back to Start menu, so if we go to Options, you'll see there's an option here that says Add a Visitor Save Report to your user menu. So the user menu is the third tab up the top here, and by default, I think just about everyone has access to that now. If they don't, you'd need to talk to someone who is, the administrator of your Donman system that can then add that so that you have access to the user menu. So if I go back up to here, add that to my user menu, I can now browse for my report. The right way around. Okay, so my newsletter email list. I can get rid of that bit and save that. Okay, so you can see now that that is basically there, so I don't have to then go in through the options of reports, reporter, file, open report format, etc. What I can do now is just click on that, and that will automatically run through and extract, create my list. If by default I said, look, I don't want to create a selection file or anything like that, I just want it to go straight to text, there is an option when you add the report to your user menu that you can do that. So if I remove this at the moment, go back up to Options, add a Visrep Save Report to my user menu. So in this case, I'm selecting the same file. If I go to the end here and put the /T, the /T, that means that every time I run this report, I won't actually see it on the screen. It will create a text file called Newsletter Email Only. Okay? And it will do that every single time. So if I take that off and now save that, I'm back at the same point. So at this point, it looks exactly the same. But if I click on there now, you can see it just quickly spat up on the screen, showing that it was doing something, because in this case my numbers are fairly small and hopefully your database is a lot bigger. But from there, that would have automatically then created the text file in my DM work directory that I can then use to either do the, the word through merge, the merge through Word, or I can use that to upload to a website or do whatever I want with it. But it just makes it a little bit easier when I know that I don't need to have the whole address and all of those different things. If we were back in Word, and said, okay, I've got a document that I want to send to people that have got an email address and some that haven't. So, of course, when I do the email ones, I'd need to change the document to make sure that it was an email document, so where we started before, yeah, as opposed to where I'd normally start and say, well, where I normally start is this under letters. So if I said, well, I've now got a mixture of people with email addresses and some without, and at the end of the day, they're pretty much going to get the same, document. But one group are going to get it via postal mail, and the other one is going to be via email. I can create these two different files, of course, where I've got my criteria for my extraction, where I'm saying the email address, must be there, or the email, or they haven't got an email address. But if I create it all in one big folder, I can also, one big file, sorry, I can also do that in Word. So when you've got your data attached, if you go to Edit Recipient List, you'll see here all the details, and then you can click on this filter button, and I can say email equal to nothing. So if I've got email equal to nothing, and then merge that to a document, that will be all the people who don't have an email address. If I then said I want to change that, so I go back to my document and change it back to an email message, then I'd say the email is greater than nothing, which means it would only do it for people that did have an email address. So you don't necessarily have to, set up two different documents and things like that. Sometimes it's a little bit cleaner to do it that way, because if I had, set this up as an email-only one, I could put this as a filter in the document, and when I save the document, that filter will be part of the document next time I want to use it. So even if I have got that data that, some have got email, some haven't, I don't need to really be too concerned about it as long as my rule's still going to work. When you do the email or the, merge to PDF or any of those other tools, it can only do them if there's an email address anyway. So it's really more the other way around, where you're trying to find the people that don't have an email address to do the postal mailing to. So in this case, if I said email equal to nothing and do OK, so it's now telling me that Word's saying it can't find any of the records to merge, because all of my records in the background here have all got email addresses. So it's saying, no, there's something wrong there. So you can see it's now killed off the filter to say, well, it didn't make sense because there's nothing there. So then I have to do greater than nothing. Okay, so you don't need to say, it has to contain the ampersand or anything like that, because the email itself, email field itself, will be either there and in the format, because when you try and put it into Donman, if you don't put, at least the ampersand and a dot something, like a .com or .com.au or .org or whatever, Donman will give you a message saying, it doesn't look like it's a valid email address. So you can't just sort of paste any, bit of text in there. If you import, where you're sort of bypassing those rules, you might end up with something in the email field that's not an email address, but the majority of times that's not going to be what's happening. So if we do that and then OK, so it's now saying, yes, I've got my full list of people, and if I went through and merge, that will merge everybody. But only because in this case I've got a list of records with email addresses, but normally I would just extract my data from Donman. I'd have a list where people have got email addresses or haven't, and I just want to, set up the document and utilize it to do both purposes. I don't necessarily want to create two separate documents. It really will depend, on yourself and what, options you want to, arrive at the end of the day, whether you're going to have graphics and things like that, what you do. But certainly, looking at email and things like that, there are lots of tools available that you can use to do it. If the mailings are very low, if you're talking low volumes, etc., like that, you may get by just doing the, finish and merge and send email messages straight from there. It just means that people will get the text as it's shown on the screen, and that will be the body of the email, and that may well suit your purpose. And if it does, you go, that's fantastic, nothing else to do. But if you're starting to, get a higher volume or want to get more advanced in those where, you have got like a whole newsletter that you want to send with graphics and things like that, if you can get all the artwork for that and upload it to Mailchimp or other systems similar, then you could do that as well. But you can still, do the merging and stuff like that and keep tabs on, all of the lists that you need to, because the overhead is really just maintaining, people that don't want to be on that list anymore, or, people where you've got bounce back. So all of those things, it's just a lot quicker than sending out the letter and then either waiting for the letter to be returned to say, the person's not here anymore, etc., or you just don't know. Because, if you've moved into a house or a flat or whatever, and, after a while of getting somebody else's email, you'll just stop doing something with it. Initially, you'll say, okay, look, I'm going to, send it back, right, return to sender, or if I know where the person is, I might even drop it off. But if it's, way out of the way, etc., there is a time limit that people will, get to the point of saying, yeah, I'm not going to do that anymore. So you won't know that, this mail is getting somewhere and it's costing you money, but it's never going to happen because the person who's there is not reading it, they're just throwing it straight in the bin. So that's not a very profitable way to sort of utilize the, the mechanism that you've got and the data you've got. Whereas email, if you send it and you're using, something electronic, then you will get bounce backs and things like that. You'll get some sort of, notification if people are on holidays or whatever it may be, and they've set out their email to, have an automatic reply. Then you will have those mechanisms available, and you can then do something with the data or, the data back in Donman to say, okay, look, people want to be removed from mail lists and things like that. So at this point in time, we don't have any, interaction or any, direct links with any of the online services as far as, like Mailchimp, basically. We don't have that, but like most things in Donman that have happened in the last 25 years or so, things that are driven by what people have desired to have, and obviously if we had quite a few people saying, this would be something that we would be interested in, having a module to do this, just like in days of old, email was very rarely used when I started with Donman anyway, whereas nowadays it's paramount, people say, well, you have to have an email field, and now people are, looking for, working up with two email addresses and things like that. So things will be dictated, and, if there's a volume of people that said, or organizations that said, look, we'd really like to have this, we're already using it already, so we're okay with that part of it, because, the third-party tools are great, but it's really just drawing that line in the sand as far as, what Donman does, and, what you can then utilize that same data for after that fact. So hopefully that's given people a little bit of an insight into, other things you can do as far as emailing the data from Donman, but not from Donman itself. But very limited what you can do there is really just straight from the donor screen. But certainly if, you're not that sort of comfortable with mail merging and things like that, but if you sort of have a file where you just create, just some of the staff members, names and email addresses and things like that, and you want to, just test doing the emails or setting them up and things like that, you can certainly play with that in Word, and it's not a very hard mechanism at all. As I said, the attachment I've shown you today, the Mail Merge Toolkit, you can Google that and, find that fairly easily. There are other tools available, but there's not too many that Murray or myself have sort of, Googled different sites and tried to look up these things. So there's only a couple that will do that point where we do the individual PDFs, which is good for receipting. For general, letters, mailings, newsletters, whatever, there is virtually no end of different, mechanisms that you could utilize to do that. So that's about all I've got to sort of show you today. So hopefully that's given an insight, and if there's any questions, I'll hand back to Marla, and we'll go through those.
Thank you, Gary. I think you have somewhat answered the few questions that have already been logged, but I'll just reiterate them and we'll just reconfirm the details. But as Gary said, if you do have any questions, we have a few moments now to answer those. So you just need to open that control panel to the right of your viewer window, type your question in the question pane, click on send, and that will come to me and I can read out your question to Gary. Gary, just confirming the product you were showing, the add-on you were showing was the Mail Merge Toolkit. That was MathLab, is that correct?
Yes. Hold on. If I can find my link here, I'll just go to Google. We'll do it. Here it is.
A live demonstration, Gary.
A live. Yeah, that's how we do it. So if we do. Okay, so as soon as you get Mail Merge Toolkit, and you'll see down here, Mail Merge Toolkit from mathlab.com.
Awesome. Okay.
So
and Chris had a question earlier, which I think you've pretty much touched on a fair bit, was how to link Donman or extract from Donman to third-party systems like Mailchimp or Campaign Monitor. is there an API or another system? Because currently they have to do a manual sync, so extract, upload and clean any duplicates that have been created by the new emails. Pretty sure you've gone through most of that. But
yeah, it certainly has been discussed, you know, having an API or something like that, like we do for, you know, credit card payments and stuff nowadays, and that was purely driven by demand, that, you know, if the demand was great enough, then obviously ASI would then, you know, consider looking at, you know, building an API that would allow us to do that, but at the moment not.
Mm-hmm. Right. Question from Delwyn, is it possible to send individual receipts by email when processing donations, similar to a receipt letter?
Not, normally not, because it is basically a merge process. You know, so you're not creating, you know, a receipt at the time. It's not like a point of sale system where you're doing the transaction and creating the receipt. It's all part of that, you know, same process as you go through and do your entries. And it's not until you get down to this point here where you're creating the actual receipt merge data file where people actually get a receipt number.
Okay. Thanks, Gary. That looks to be all the questions for now, so we might just start the wrap-up. Okay, so thank you, Gary, for today's webcast, and thank you, everybody, for attending today and taking time out of your busy day. This was our last webcast for the year, and we will bring you details shortly of our 2017 program. So thank you for your attendance throughout the year, and I'm sure you'll also join me in thanking Gary and Murray, who isn't with us today but has been for the rest of the year, for presenting such informative and helpful webcasts throughout the year. They not only present them, they prepare them, they come up with the topics, and they do all our tricks and tips that are in our newsletter every couple of months as well. So I know that they're all very popular and very helpful to everyone, so thank you, Gary and Murray. Now, as per usual, you will find recordings of all of our webcasts on our Donman website. If you go to donman.net.au under the Resources tab, you'll find a click-through from there, or it's on our normal tech support portal as well. Now, if you do have any further questions, feel free to email us or give us a call. But that concludes our webcast for today, so thank you all for joining us, and we look forward to talking to you in the new year. Goodbye for now.
Thanks, everyone.